How much money has been made out of all this?
So far, my secretary said it was £779,000!
So this Svengali, this charlatan, this mismanager, this terrifying creature, you know, that now the media had an image of, was suddenly blossomed.
McLaren was becoming increasingly disillusioned with the music business and his role as punk band manager. So he refocused his energies on the shop in King's Road, where, since renaming it Sex in the mid-70s, he and Vivian had been creating a new look for the tribe of punk.
Music didn't really provide the whole story anymore. The identity, the sexual identity, in fashion was important because people are always uncomfortable in their own skin.
You need
all the changing of the facades and all the different aspects of fashion on the King's Road that me and Vivian created for such a period and length of time became the dominant cultural point. Fashion, its power lies in its extraordinary ability to provide an identity.
The risque clothing for which the shop was now infamous wasn't just a challenge to other people's inhibitions. Its roots lay deep in McLaren's own dysfunctional family history, dating back to the Second World War.
And Malcolm certainly had a problem with the fact that his mother had rejected him, and all kinds of stories about his mother being either man-mad or involved in some sort of, I don't know, I would say wartime prostitution, because I think it was done out of sort of necessity of survival more than, you know, really going and selling yourself on the street or something.
He also had a very sad, dark side too, of course, a very tortured side due to his upbringing. So he had that side which he hid usually from the public, but I certainly knew. Malcolm often dreamed. He dreamt a lot, and he spoke in his dreams. And I was actually able to converse with him in his dream, which sounds very strange, but I would ask him questions and he would answer, and this could go on for half an hour longer. And they were always about him when he was a little boy, anywhere from age about 4 to about age 9, I'd say. And it usually revolved around food and also clothing. It was very important to him what he wore and what his grandmother would buy for him to wear.
I felt he'd gone on a real journey that had started off, you know, with his grandmother, and the restrictions and the slightly warped spin she put on everything that he sort of, as he grew sexually. He was too close to her. She had a lot of influence on him, and she had strange ideas. And I don't really know what went on, but I know it had a massive effect on him and closed him down, really. So not only was his asexualness to do with the fact that he looked kind of pretty and petite, but I think his grandmother had a massive effect.
The fantasy world of McLaren's childhood and the books he'd read would become an inspiration for the fancy dress wardrobe he created for his musical protégés.
Reading about Blackbeard as a kid, memories of reading about Blackbeard, of reading about Geronimo, the last great Apache outlaw, suddenly leapt to life in my imagination as very colourful people in terms of their look.
For a while after the Sex Pistols, I guess he carried on, in inverted commas, being a kind of pop manager, pop impresario, hired as a sort of drifting consultant by people like Adam and the Ants. I think Adam and the Ants paid him, the myth goes, and I quite like it, paid him 1,000 guineas to give him some ideas.
He's talking about no romantic pirates and heroics. He said, everybody's wearing black, boy. Colour, heroicism. You know, that was what it was about. And he's told Geronimo, look at Geronimo, boy. Look at pirates, boy. Go. He said, give me £1,000, don't tell no one, and I'll manage you. Great. And he gave me an education. And then he told me about the construction of pop music, and then he gave me a tape of, which I still got, because I used to make notes with him. I bet I'd be, what would he just say? Because he'd throw 5,000 ideas at you and you'd catch 3 of them. But those 3 of them could change history. That's, to me, I took them.
McLaren gets involved, he gives them that Burundi beat sound, he gives them a few tips about how to do it, he gives them a silly idea, simple as that, put some makeup on, something that everyone can copy. And suddenly, they're packing out huge halls all over the UK, they're having #1 hits, you know, they were, he saw the raw material and packaged it perfectly for pop.
True to form, Malcolm tore up the packaging. He stole Adamant's band and used it as a backing group for his most recent discovery, Annabella Lewin.
I used to work in a dry cleaners, pocket money, when I was very young, being 13. I actually came in to talk to my boss to fire me, or to make me resign. So she has to quit. She can't work here anymore. She's going to be in a rock and roll band, you know.
I had observed that all of the pop generation that had changed social attitudes were a generation that really always was at that level of teenagehood where they were virgins and they were still experimenting with their sexuality. And I thought that Annabella was perfect for that. And the way to deal with the prostitution as a cool idea from the 70s, as I experienced all these punk kids hanging out on Park Lane, I recreated Déjeuner sur l'herbe by Edouard Manet. There you could have all the band completely clothed, but the Truth Loves to Go Naked would be this girl who perhaps in the picture was once a prostitute but now is Annabella at 13. It was a bit of a scandal. We did suffer problems, but nevertheless that icon I knew would live out.
I don't like you.
Lewin too was discarded, another victim of Malcolm's troubled ego.
It's kind of like a similar situation to, you know, a child, really. I would only let an analogy is it's a child, you know. A child wants to get his own way, and when he doesn't get his own way, he starts stamping his foot and knocking everything down. And that's kind of what happened with us towards the end of the management situation with Malcolm McLaren.
And he carried on regardless.
It's just interesting that it created as much controversy, I suppose, as almost a painting did 100 years ago, which just shows you how far we've got. And the lyric itself saying, "Truth loves to go naked," just really inspired me to think that the roots of things and the idea of getting away from all that synthesised and established practice of trying to package everything so tightly just began to be very nauseating for me, and I decided to look a lot deeper into folk cultures around the world and came up with the word nostalgia of mud, which is basically a mixture of races.
The world music mix that McLaren recorded would prove a huge success, and after his problems with so many vocalists, he decided on a strategy that would make him the central character in his own story.
And I think he then realised, you know, rather insanely in a way, amazingly, that maybe he should be the front person, if you like. And at that time, that seemed like a fairly preposterous thing to do because he was the manager. So it was a bit like Brian Epstein or Colonel Tom Parker suddenly being the act.
Clap, clap. Clap, clap. Move your legs from side to side. Like an animal. With nowhere to hide.
I always saw Malcolm as a sponge. He'd go somewhere and he'd sort of soak up what was going on there and then squeeze it out over the people over there and vice versa.
And then the idea of taking a bit of South Africa with a bit of Zulu, if you like, with a bit of, American Red Indian or Appalachian or whatever, and putting it together with this new way of making music that appealed to his pirate sense, because he could see already, even in 1980, 81, what was essentially happening was what happened elsewhere in other art forms, was this compilation of new material out of other people's material, the quoting.